Hello, Michael here, looking at Psalms 89 for our devotion. A psalm which may be subtitled, I will sing of the steadfast love of the Lord. And today we're focusing on verse 38 through to 42 for our devotion. Let's go ahead and read those verses. Verse 38. But thou hast cast off and abhorred, thou hast been wroth with thine anointed. 39. Thou hast made void the covenant of thy servant. Thou hast profaned his crown by casting it to the ground. And 40. Thou hast broken down all his edges. Thou hast brought his strongholds to ruin. And 41. All that pass by the way spoil him. He is a reproach to his neighbours. 42. Thou hast set up the right hand of his adversaries. Thou hast made all his enemies to rejoice. And as we turn to the treasury of David for the exposition, let's go ahead and read verse 38 again. But thou hast cast off and abhorred, thou hast been wroth with thine anointed. But thou hast cast off and abhorred. The Lord had promised not to cast off the seed of David, and yet it looked as if he had done so, and that too in the most angry manner, as if he loathed the person of the king. God's action may appear to us to be the reverse of his promises, and then our best course is to come before him in prayer and put the matter before him, just as it strikes our apprehension. We are allowed to do this, for this holy and inspired man did so unrebuked, but we must do it humbly and in faith. Thou hast been wroth with thine anointed. He deserved the wrath, doubtless, but the psalmist's point is that this appeared to him to conflict with the gracious covenant. He puts the matter plainly and makes bold with the Lord, and the Lord loves to have his servants so do. It shows that they believe his engagements to be matter of fact. In verse 39 that reads, Thou hast made void the covenant of thy servant. Thou hast profaned his crown by casting it to the ground. Thou hast made void the covenant of thy servant. The dispensations of providence looked as if there had been a annulling of the sacred compact, though indeed it was not so. Thou hast profaned his crown by casting it to the ground. The king had been subject to such sorrow and shame that his diadem had been as if it were taken from his head, dashed on the earth, and rolled in the mire. He was a theocratic monarch, and the Lord, who gave him his crown, took it from him and treated it with contempt. At least so it seemed. In these sad days also we may utter the same complaint, for Jesus is not acknowledged in many of the churches, and usurpers have profaned his crown. When we hear of kings and queens set up as heads of the church, and a priest styled the vicar of Christ, while parliaments and courts take upon themselves to legislate for the church of God, we may bitterly lament that things should come to so wretched a pass. Few are there who will acknowledge the crown rights of King Jesus. The very subject is considered to be out of date. O Lord, how long? And verse 40 that reads, Thou hast broken down all his hedges, thou hast brought his strongholds to ruin. Spurgeon exposits. Thou hast broken down all his hedges. He was no longer sheltered from the slanderous assaults of contemptuous tongues. The awe which should guard the royal name had ceased to separate him from his fellows. The divinity which doth hedge a king had departed. Hitherto, the royal family had been like a vine within an enclosure, but the will was now laid low, and the vine was unprotected. It is sorrowfully true that in many places the enclosures of the church have been destroyed. The line of demarcation between the church and the world has almost vanished, and godless men fill the sacred offices. Alas, O Lord God, Shall it be always so? Shall thy true vine be deserted by thee, thou great husbandman? Set up the boundaries again, and keep thy church as a vineyard reserved for thyself. Thou hast brought his strongholds to ruin. The forts of the land were in the possession of the enemy, and were dismantled, and defences of the kingdom were overthrown. Thus has it happened that precious truths, which were the bulwark of the church, have been assailed by heresy, and the citadels of sound doctrine have been abandoned to the foe. O God, how canst thou suffer this? As the God of truth, wilt thou not arise and tread down falsehood? Verse 41 that reads, all that pass by the way spoil him. He is a reproach to his neighbours. All that pass by the way spoil him. Idle passers-by, who have nothing else to do, must needs have a pluck at this vine, and they do it without difficulty, since the hedges are gone. Woe is the day when every pretty reasoner has an argument against religion, and men in their cups are fluent with objection against the gospel of Jesus. Although Jesus on the cross is nothing to them, and they pass him by without inquiring into what he has done for them, yet they can loiter as long as they will, if there be but the hope of driving another nail into his hands and helping to crucify the Lord afresh. They will not touch him with the finger of faith, but they pluck at him with the hand of malice. He is a reproach to his neighbours. David's successors had unneighbourly neighbours, who were a reproach to good fellowship, because they were so ready to reproach their neighbour. The Jews were much more taunted by the surrounding Gentiles when at any time they fell into trouble. At this time the people of God, who follow the Lord fully, are subject to 1,000 reproaches, and some of them of the most bitter kind. These reproaches are really the reproach of Christ, and at bottom are meant for him. Shall it always be so? Shall he who deserves to be universally adored be subject to general scorn? Where then, O God, is thy faithfulness to thy covenant? And verse 42 that reads, thou hast set up the right hand of his adversaries. Thou hast made all his enemies to rejoice. Thou hast set up thy right hand of thy adversaries. Thou hast done it. Thou who hast sworn to give him help and victory, thou hast, instead thereof, sided with the enemies, and lent them thy strength, so that they have gained the supremacy. Thou hast made all his enemies to rejoice. They are boasting over him, and are glorying in his defeat, and this is done by thyself, O God. How is this? Where is the covenant? Hast thou forgotten thine own pledges and promises? Wow. Pieces of the exposition here fitted for us to understand how God can be angry and withdraw his shield and protection as he wills. Blessed be his holy name, for we know in the end he's ever sure to be our guide, our relief, our blessing, our deliverance. Trust you enjoyed the meditation. Michael here declaring yet again, Jesus is Lord. Until next time, be blessed.